Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is May 3rd, 2024, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? So let's go over the news updates today, and then we'll go over the map. So it's going to be a very brief video. And before I begin, guys, please, if you enjoy my content, if you're a first-time viewer, subscribe to my channel and leave me a like if you enjoyed this video, because I will have more content in the future, of course. So let's begin with some very important statements that have been made this week by very important European leaders. The first one, which is the most important one, is from the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, who stated and reiterated what he said a few months ago, and I believe it was in February, that he still considers an approach where, or a possibility where, the deployment of French troops would happen in Ukraine if there would be a huge Russian breakthrough, and at the request, of course, of the Ukrainian government. So it is still something that the French administration or government is considering, and it's very, very good to hear these types of statements, as I've said in the past, from the president of France, because remember a few years ago, well, when the conflict started, the war started between Russia and Ukraine, Macron was still giving phone calls, thinking that a diplomatic way could be found with Putin and they could find a compromise. Clearly, I think that more and more Emmanuel Macron realized that's not going to happen. And so it's very, very positive to see these types of statements. However, of course, we need to remember that it's not just about the statements, it's about the actions. So let's say if Ukraine will ask for the help of France, then they have to pull through. They have to actually follow what they just said. Because if not, it's going to be a huge embarrassment for not only the French president, but also Europe. Because again, it's all about, it's just talk, right? And we need decisive action to be taken. So for now, I like this hawkish president, but we'll see if he actually will follow through. And additionally, the Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, who was actually the one of the previous prime ministers of England, now came to Ukraine today and confirmed that London gives the permission for Ukraine to utilize their weapons against Russia in Russia. So very positive. Again, this is, I think, the very first time we get a confirmation from a Ukraine ally saying that Ukraine can actually use their weapons on Russia. So this is a very big development, because this is the first, and I hope that other countries in Europe will follow through as well. And let's not forget that the United Kingdom has provided dozens of Storm Shadows, and the Storm Shadows have the range necessary to hit Russian soil. So possibly next few months, Ukraine will be able to utilize Storm Shadows and the French Scalps, possibly, to hit Russian targets such as refineries, oil depots, which will pack a much bigger punch than the current Ukrainian long-range drones do. So we'll see what happens, but overall, this is a very, very positive week in terms of decisiveness and leadership from Europe. And you can expect... you could have expected this type of reaction from the Kremlin, because you have Dmitry Peskov, the press secretary of the Kremlin. And before I mention his reaction, or the reaction of the Kremlin, I want to remind my viewers that his kids of Peskov actually live and study in Europe. So this man that's been criticizing and essentially worshipping the destruction of the West, his kids live in Europe and they're studying in foreign European universities. And I believe his son is somewhere in London, if I remember correctly. So food for thought for you guys. And what's really important here is that you can see what the Kremlin is truly afraid of. You can see that he essentially, Peskov mentions that such an action or such a confirmation of, giving the permission to Ukraine to utilize British weapons on Russian soil is dangerous and escalating tensions between Russia and the West. And as if Russia hasn't escalated enough, right? They've been threatening with nuclear weapons. The entire continent of Europe, if not the entire world, they've been using chemical weapons. They have used Iranian drones and missiles against Ukrainian forces and Ukrainian civilians. And they've been also utilizing North Korean ballistic missiles in Ukraine. So, I mean, way to project your fears, Russia. And the mental gymnastics that Peskov has to play is truly something to be admired, right? Because his kids live in the decadent West. So why are you criticizing the West? Why are you essentially worshipping its fallout and destruction. So overall, you can see that this is very positive. The Kremlin is panicking because they realize that Europe is getting stronger, which was the opposite strategy that Russia was trying to push, right? The strategy was to divide them, to weaken them, make them argue between one another. And of course, it's not like Europe right now is perfect and perfectly united, but you have the biggest countries like France, Britain, even Germany, Scandinavia, the Baltics, Italy, really pulling together and saying, you know what, we need to become more stronger, more decisive, because we might be on our own in 2025. God knows what's going to happen if Trump gets elected and leaves NATO. That's a possibility. So the Kremlin is very afraid of this. And, it's kind of funny because all these oligarchs, these Russian elites, these politicians, where do you think they're spending all their corrupt money in or at? In Europe, in the United States. They're buying these villas, they're buying these apartments in London, houses in France, sending their kids and other dependents in the West, in universities or whatever. They don't want to spend their money in Russia. They want to spend it in the West. So the irony. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is Gazprom. So a very large gas company in Russia, very profitable. But it appears that it hasn't been profitable in 2023 because it reported a loss of $6.9 billion in net losses. Massive, right? This is a company that's been profitable for the last quarter century, and its last annual net loss was in 1999. This is a big deal because this was for 2023, and 2024 will only get worse for all these gas and oil companies in Russia. It's not just Gazprom, it's Lukoil, it's Rosneft, it's Novatek, and this picture is actually from a Novatek gas terminal that was hit by the Ukrainian drones in January of this year. And you guys, of course, have been seeing the Ukrainians have been hitting nonstop on a weekly basis Russian oil refineries, oil depots, gas terminals. It's only going to get worse. Ukraine has found the Russian Achilles heel, as they don't have any air defense systems or nearly enough to protect their skies in Russia. So Ukraine just is flying freely by utilizing very cheap drones to destroy these refineries or damage them. And of course, how do you guys think that Putin got so strong and rich in the first place? Is the fossil fuel industry. And losing this profitability in this sector is going to be just devastating, catastrophic for the Putin regime. And of course, Europe now doesn't want to trade and isn't trading for gas with Russia. So this is one of the main reasons why Gazprom has lost so much in 2023. And China, India, and other countries in the global south are purchasing Russian oil and gas at a massive discount because Russia doesn't have the choice but to sell them to other markets for much cheaper. And you can bet that because of that, many oligarchs and elites are certainly looking at all this with concern, because that's not the deal that they signed up for with Putin, right? They signed up for, we're going to make money and we're going to support you, right? So by supporting you, you're going to allow us to make as many billions as we want. And that's not the case. Their foreign assets are frozen in Europe and the West. Now their companies are losing profitability. There's certainly something ongoing right now in the Kremlin that we don't know of. And I believe that right now there's a lot of talk of trying to find a solution to get rid of Putin. That's why Putin is so paranoid. Recently, he's been arresting everybody left and right, purging, killing, arresting, some people that were believed to be his friends. So Putin understands that very well. So 2024 will only get worse for Russia and these oil and gas companies, which, are essentially compose a massive percentage of the Russian GDP. Now, before I end this video, let's do a quick map update. So first I want to discuss development that happened a few days ago. You guys probably heard about it, but it's good to report on it again. The Ukrainians utilized about 3 or 4 ATACMS to hit a Russian training ground in Luhansk, very far away from the front line. That is about 115 kilometers from Kupiansk. And this is a camp or training ground around the village of Rohove, and you can see that here there is the 1st Guards Motor Rifle Regiment that is stationed. So a very juicy target, and according to reports, the Ukrainians managed to injure and kill over 116 Russian soldiers that were present in the camp, and also including all the vehicles and armored vehicles that were present. There is a video that also confirms this strike. So a very juicy target, and you can see that the Ukrainians right now, having received the new batch of ATACMS, they can hit those really deep military camps, military bases, airfields that are located in Ukraine. It's been confirmed that the United States asked Ukraine to not utilize the ATACMS on Russian soil, which is unfortunate, but maybe in the future they will permit Ukraine to do it, because we've seen that England is now, or Britain is, the UK is saying that Ukraine can utilize their weapons, so maybe the United States is going to follow through. We'll see. So you can see that this is going to be the strategy, really hit the rear of the Russian military in occupied territories of Ukraine, and that's really going to be devastating. It's going to be like the 2022 HIMARS campaign back in the summer of 2022, where it was essentially every single day we saw videos of Russian ammunition depots and bases blowing up because they were kind of close to the front line. But now the Russians have adapted, of course, and most of their bases are, as you can see, very far away, where they're training their new soldiers, their new recruits, mobilized soldiers, where their staging areas are. So this is a very significant development. And before I end this video, of course, we need to go over the main sector where the Russians will push this summer, which is Ocheretyne, north of Avdiivka, and Chasiv Yar. So as you can see, the Russians have kind of slowed down their partial breakthrough. We've reported on that. It's a partial breakthrough of 5 to 7 kilometers that the Russians made in the past few weeks. So now you can see that it's kind of slowed down. There aren't that many changes on the map. You can see that right now they're trying to consolidate this sector around the village of Ocheretyne, that is Arkhangelske, Keramik. So these fields, they probably will try to consolidate. But certainly we're not talking about a breakthrough of the Russians capable of pushing 20, 30 kilometers in a matter of a few days. That's not going to happen. And let me remind my viewers that this entire sector, what the Russians took recently, that was 7 months worth of battles, and bloody battles for the Russians. Of course, it's bloody for the Ukrainians as well, unfortunately, but the Russians lost so much in this sector. We've seen so much footage of large convoys being destroyed, hundreds of Russians being obliterated to bits by Ukrainian drones, if not thousands of them. They've lost close to 50,000 troops, that is, missing in action, wounded and killed for Avdiivka alone. So it's not going to be a huge breakthrough for the Russians. I don't anticipate that to be the case, especially with Western help coming in, and certainly Syrskyi prioritizing this front first in terms of the new weaponry coming from the United States and Europe. And of course, the other sector which is problematic for the Ukrainians is Chasiv Yar. We've talked about it many times. I believe this is going to be a very big offensive for the Russians. They need a large city, and they're at the gates of Chasiv Yar. But for the last week or 2 weeks, it's pretty much been the same. So the Russians right now are very close to the gates of the city, and they're currently located in this forested area, very close to the city of Chasiv Yar, but they haven't moved further in. Of course, there's been some talks of possibly the Russians being successful taking Chasiv Yar, but it's not going to be in the nearby future. Certainly, as we know that there's been a deadline given by Putin to take Chasiv Yar by May 9th, so next week, which is definitely not going to happen. And as I've said, the Ukrainian help, or the foreign help to Ukraine, especially from the United States, is coming in right now. So the Ukrainians will certainly prioritize this sector with air defenses, ammunition and shells, and armored vehicles to be able to hold Chasiv Yar as much as they can. Because let's remember that Chasiv Yar has been also pulverized like Bakhmut, like Avdiivka, and it's difficult to defend a city that's been destroyed completely. So, yeah, that's the situation, around Chasiv Yar and Bakhmut right now. So my last comments before I end this video, guys, is I'm expecting next week to be very, very explosive for Russia. We have the inauguration of Putin, and we also have the May 9th parade in Moscow and other cities. So I think that the Ukrainians have been preparing and planning some surprises for Putin, some fireworks for him to help with the inauguration. So you guys can let me know in the comment section what you think. Do you think it's going to be quiet next week, or you think that Ukraine is going to prepare a lot of big surprises explosive, fiery surprises for Putin? Let me know in the comments. So again, thank you for your support. Please subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Slava Ukraini!